A billionaire asks his fat maid why she never smiles, but her answer doesn't just shock him, it breaks him. She says quietly, "Because the last man who told me to smile left me with a scar I still pray over." He thought she was just another worker in his mansion, until he discovers the truth. She's connected to a tragedy his company caused years ago. Now, every time she scrubs his floors or hums a broken hymn, his guilt eats him alive. But here's the twist. She doesn't know he's the reason her world fell apart. When the secret finally comes out, hearts will shatter, faith will be tested, and forgiveness will become the only thing that can save them both. She's ready to forgive the world, but can she forgive him? And when the truth is this painful, who really deserves redemption? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The evening rain patters against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Graham Sterling's top-floor office, casting wavering shadows across his expensive leather shoes. He stands with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the Atlanta skyline disappear behind sheets of grey rain. The city lights blur into watery halos, matching his unfocused thoughts. His 20-room mansion sprawls beneath him, every inch of it polished to perfection. Yet the gleaming surfaces and precise arrangements only emphasize the hollowness inside. The quietness rings in his ears, broken only by the occasional shuffle of feet from his staff moving about their duties below. Graham checks his platinum watch, 6:30 in the evening. The sound of humming drifts up from downstairs, a soft melody that catches his attention. It's not the first time he's heard it. The tune wraps around his consciousness like a gentle question, refusing to be ignored. He recognizes the voice, Luna Johnson, one of his newer maids. Her presence in his house has been marked by those quiet hymns she sings while working. There's something in the way she moves through the rooms, head slightly bowed, hands steady as she polishes and cleans. Her plus-sized figure moves with a grace that seems at odds with the tense atmosphere his presence usually creates among the staff. The humming stops abruptly as he descends the curved staircase. Luna is on her knees, methodically working polish into the marble floors. Her dark hands move in small circles, and even from behind, Graham can see the care she takes with each movement. Throughout the day, the sound of her voice keeps drawing his attention. During his video conferences, while reviewing quarterly reports, even as he takes his solitary lunch in his study, that melody weaves through his thoughts, carrying a sadness he can't quite place. By dinner time, his curiosity has morphed into irritation. The dining room feels too large for one person, the long mahogany table stretching out before him like an accusation. Luna moves quietly around the edges of the room, replacing fresh flowers in the crystal vases, her presence both unobtrusive and somehow impossible to ignore. "Why do you never smile?" The words burst from him before he can stop them. He expects her to startle, to stammer an apology, to hurry from the room like most of his staff do when he addresses them directly. Instead, Luna's movements slow to a stop. She turns to face him, her dark eyes meeting his with unexpected steadiness. There's no fear in her gaze, only a deep, tired knowledge that makes him want to look away. But he doesn't. "Because, sir," she says, her voice as level as her gaze, "the last man who told me to smile left me with a scar I still pray over." The words land in the space between them with the weight of stone dropped into still water. Graham's fork freezes halfway to his mouth. The silence that follows feels charged, heavy with unspoken stories. Luna returns to her task, arranging the flowers with the same careful attention as before, as if she hadn't just cracked open the carefully maintained veneer of employer-employee distance. But something has shifted in the room's atmosphere, like a door being opened to let in a different kind of air. Later that night, Graham sits in his study, a glass of untouched scotch on the desk beside him. The leather chair that usually feels like a throne now seems to swallow him in its depths. Outside, the rain continues its steady drumming against the windows, but it's Luna's words that echo in his mind. A scar I still pray over. He finds himself wondering about that scar. Is it physical or emotional? The way she said it suggested both. Her voice had carried no self-pity, no invitation for sympathy. Just a simple statement of fact, delivered with dignity that made his own questions seem shallow and demanding. The usual comfort of his study eludes him tonight. The walls of books, the expensive art pieces, the perfectly arranged furniture, all of it feels like an elaborate stage set, carefully constructed to project success and control. But Luna's words have somehow exposed the artifice of it all. He swirls the scotch in his glass, watching the amber liquid catch the light. In its reflection, he sees his own face, lined with years of driving ambition and careful distance. When was the last time someone had spoken to him with such unvarnished honesty? When was the last time he'd allowed it? The humming had stopped after their exchange at dinner. The house feels emptier for its absence, though he would never admit this aloud. Graham realizes he's straining to hear it, missing the gentle intrusion of faith and feeling into his carefully ordered world. Her words continue to resonate in his mind, refusing to be filed away with all the other interactions he's had with his staff over the years. There's something about the way she said it, not as a challenge or an accusation, but as a simple truth, that keeps drawing his thoughts back to that moment. The rain intensifies outside, drumming against the windows with renewed force. Graham remains in his study, surrounded by all the trappings of his success, yet feeling more unsettled than he has in years. Luna's voice, both in her hymns and in her honest answer, has somehow found a crack in his carefully constructed walls, and now he can't stop wondering what else might seep through. The morning sun struggles to pierce through Atlanta's lingering clouds, casting Graham Sterling's home office in a grey light that matches his restless mood. He sits at his mahogany desk, staring at his laptop screen without really seeing it. The quarterly reports that usually command his full attention blur before his eyes as Luna's words from the previous evening echo in his thoughts. A scar I still pray over. With an irritated sigh, he minimizes his spreadsheet and opens the personnel files. His fingers hover over the keyboard for a moment before typing Luna Johnson into the search bar. The file opens, revealing a photograph he's never properly looked at before. A younger Luna, her face softer with a hint of a smile that's now absent. His eyes scan the document, eyebrows rising slightly. Bachelor's degree in community development, former youth program coordinator, church choir director for 5 years. The credentials paint a picture so different from the quiet woman who polishes his floors that he reads them twice to be sure. A soft knock interrupts his thoughts. "Come in," he calls out, quickly closing the personnel file. Miss Loretta enters, her silver hair neat beneath her customary headband. "Your morning coffee, Mr. Sterling," she says, placing the steaming cup on his desk. She served him coffee every morning for 15 years, her presence as reliable as the sunrise. "Thank you, Loretta." He pauses, then adds with practiced casualness, "I was just reviewing some staff files. Luna Johnson. She seems to have quite an interesting background." Loretta's usually cheerful face grows serious. She adjusts her glasses, a habit Graham recognizes as her way of buying time to choose her words carefully. "Luna used to be like sunshine itself," she says finally, her voice taking on a wistful quality. "That girl could light up a whole room with her smile and her songs." Graham leans forward slightly, his coffee forgotten. "What changed?" Loretta's eyes grow distant. "A storm of lies, Mr. Sterling. Sometimes it only takes one person with a grudge and a powerful voice to destroy what took years to build. She straightens her apron, her expression clouding. That poor child lost everything, her reputation, her career, even her place in the community she'd served so faithfully. Graham feels an unfamiliar twinge in his chest. He recognizes it as guilt, though he's not sure why. "And the singing?" he asks, remembering the haunting hymns he'd heard yesterday. Haven't heard her really sing since then. Just those quiet hymns she hums while working, like little prayers they are. Loretta gives him a knowing look. "Though I suspect you've noticed those yourself." He nods, unable to deny it. "Thank you, Loretta. That will be all." After she leaves, Graham sits back in his chair, turning this new information over in his mind. The rest of the morning passes in a blur of unanswered emails and half-read documents. By late afternoon, he finds himself walking the halls of his mansion, drawn by the sound of cleaning supplies coming from his rarely used office on the first floor. Luna is there, carefully dusting the bookshelves. She notices him immediately but continues her work, maintaining the professional distance that suddenly feels wrong, given what he now knows about her past. "You're humming," he starts, then stops, realizing he hasn't actually planned what to say. "It's nice." She pauses, duster suspended in mid-air. "Thank you, sir." She responds quietly, her eyes remaining on the shelf before her. Graham clears his throat. "I understand you used to sing. Professionally, I mean. In a choir." Now she does turn to look at him, surprise flickering across her features. "That was a long time ago," she says carefully. "There's a piano in the parlor," he finds himself saying. "No one's touched it in years, but it's regularly tuned. You're welcome to use it, if you'd like." Luna's hands tighten on the duster. "That's very kind, sir," she says, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I've no right to fill this house with songs." The words hit Graham with unexpected force. Before he can respond, Luna returns to her dusting, her movements more hurried now. He stands there for a moment longer, wanting to say something else but finding no words. Later that night, unable to sleep, Graham wanders the darkened halls of his mansion. The sound of sweeping draws him to the grand staircase. He stops in the shadows of the upper landing, watching as Luna works below. Her broom moves in steady strokes across the marble floor, and with each movement, a quiet melody emerges. The hymn is different from yesterday's. Something about grace and healing. Her voice is so soft he has to strain to hear it, but the gentle notes float up to where he stands, filling the empty space with something that makes his chest ache. Graham remains there, hidden in the darkness, listening as Luna works her way across the floor. The melody wraps around him like a forgotten memory, stirring something he thought he'd buried long ago. He doesn't understand why her quiet songs affect him so deeply, why her refusal to use the piano bothers him, or why he suddenly cares about the story behind her scars. The humming continues, a thread of sound in the silent house, and Graham finds himself holding his breath, afraid that any movement might break this fragile moment. Below, Luna sweeps and hums, unaware of her audience, each note a quiet defiance against whatever silence tries to contain it. 2 days pass like autumn leaves drifting on a gentle breeze. Luna finds herself standing before the parlor door during her afternoon break, her hand trembling slightly on the polished brass doorknob. The room waits behind the heavy wooden door, silent and pristine, holding memories of parties long past and music long forgotten. She steps inside, inhaling the scent of lemon polish and aged wood. Sunlight streams through tall windows, dancing across the dark cherry floors and settling on the grand piano that commands the center of the room. Its ebony surface gleams like still water, untouched, but perfectly maintained. Luna's feet carry her forward before her mind can protest. Her fingers, calloused from years of cleaning, hover over the ivory keys. She touches one tentatively, as if greeting an old friend she'd abandoned long ago. The note rings clear and true in the quiet room. "Hello," she whispers to the piano, her voice thick with emotion. More notes follow, hesitant at first, like a child learning to walk again. The melody is broken, stumbling, but filled with such longing it seems to make the air itself tremble. She doesn't hear Graham's footsteps in the hallway, doesn't notice him pause in the doorway, his phone still warm in his hand from an important business call. He stands there, transfixed by the sight of her at the piano, her shoulders relaxed in a way he's never seen before. When Luna finally senses his presence, her hands jerk away from the keys as if burned. She stands quickly, smoothing her uniform with trembling hands. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Sterling. I shouldn't have. I know I should be working. I'll get back to—" "Don't stop." His voice is soft, almost pleading. It surprises them both. Luna hesitates, her eyes searching his face for any sign of anger or mockery. Finding none, she slowly sits back down, her hands returning to the keys like birds coming home to roost. The melody resumes, stronger now. It's an old hymn, one about healing and hope, but she plays it like a lullaby. Graham finds himself leaning against the door frame, his eyes closing as the music washes over him. When the last note fades, neither of them speaks for a long moment. Finally, Luna stands, ducking her head as she passes him. But just before she disappears into the hallway, Graham sees something new in her eyes, a tiny spark of life, like the first star appearing at dusk. The next evening, as Luna finishes cleaning the library, Graham appears in the doorway. "Would you play again?" he asks, the words coming out more uncertain than he'd intended. She looks up from the bookshelf she's dusting, surprise evident on her face. But there's something else, too, a quiet confidence that wasn't there before. She nods once and follows him to the parlor. This time, when she sits at the piano, her back is straighter. Her fingers find the keys with more assurance, and the music flows like a gentle stream. Graham settles into an armchair, watching as she loses herself in the melody. From the hallway, Miss Loretta observes them both, a knowing smile playing at the corners of her mouth. She's seen enough winters turn to spring to recognize the signs of thawing ice. Later that night, during dinner, Graham breaks their usual silence. "Do you have family in Atlanta?" he asks, trying to sound casual as he cuts into his steak. Luna's hand pauses, fork suspended above her plate. As part of the household staff, she occasionally joins him for dinner when working late, though usually in silence. "I did," she says finally. "My sister Naomi." Her voice catches slightly on the name. "Did?" Graham prompts gently. "She died 6 years ago." Luna sets down her fork, her appetite suddenly gone. "Car crash. The navigation system in her car malfunctioned. Some faulty update from a big tech company. Sent her right off the highway." Graham's knife scrapes harshly against his plate. His shoulders tense, and his jaw tightens almost imperceptibly. But he says nothing, his silence heavy with something Luna can't quite read. She rises from the table, gathering her plate. "Thank you for dinner, Mr. Sterling, and for letting me play the piano." She turns to leave, but pauses at the doorway, glancing back. Graham sits motionless, his food forgotten. His eyes meet hers, and the look in them makes her breath catch. He's staring at her like a man who's been living in darkness, suddenly confronted with dawn. Equal parts wonder and fear, recognition and denial. Neither of them moves for what feels like an eternity. The grandfather clock in the hall counts out the seconds with solemn precision, marking time in a moment that seems to exist outside of it. Finally, Luna breaks away first, her footsteps echoing softly as she retreats to the kitchen, leaving Graham alone with his thoughts and the weight of unspoken words. Miss Loretta, watching from her post near the kitchen, shakes her head slowly. She's seen that look before, the look of a man beginning to realize the true cost of his carefully constructed walls. She turns away, humming softly to herself as she goes about her evening duties, knowing that sometimes the hardest bridges to cross are the ones we build ourselves. The dining room remained still, Graham's figure silhouetted against the warm glow of the chandelier, his dinner growing cold before him. Through the open window, a gentle evening breeze carries the faint echo of Luna's earlier music, as if the very air remembers the notes she played and refuses to let them fade completely away. Morning sunlight streams through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Sterling Systems' downtown Atlanta headquarters, but Graham Sterling barely notices it. His leather chair creaks as he shifts position for the 100th time, unable to concentrate on the quarterly reports spread across his mahogany desk. Luna's words from the previous night echo in his mind. Some faulty update from a big tech company. His stomach churns. He pulls up his calendar, cancelling his morning meetings with a few quick clicks. Opening his computer, he types Naomi Johnson accident into the company's archived records. His fingers hover over the keyboard, trembling slightly. Part of him wants to close the window, to return to his carefully maintained ignorance. But Luna's face appears in his mind, the quiet dignity in her eyes when she spoke of her sister. The search yields nothing. Of course not. The legal team would have buried it deep. Graham runs his hands through his silver-streaked hair, leaving it slightly disheveled. 6 years ago, Sterling Systems had faced a massive lawsuit over a navigation system update that caused several accidents. He'd let his legal team handle it, signing settlements without reading names, protecting the company's reputation above all else. The afternoon crawls by in a haze of distraction. During a video conference, he catches himself staring at the window, watching rain clouds gather over the Atlanta skyline. His chief financial officer has to call his name twice before he responds. "Are you feeling all right, Mr. Sterling?" His assistant asks as he packs up early. "Just tired," he mutters, though exhaustion has nothing to do with the heaviness in his chest. At home, the mansion feels different now that he knows. Every corner where Luna works, every surface she polishes, it all seems to mock him. He watches her from his study as she dusts the hallway photographs, humming softly to herself. The sound that once irritated him now fills him with guilt. The crash of breaking china shatters the evening quiet. Graham jumps up from his desk, following the sound to the kitchen. Luna kneels beside a broken serving dish, already picking up the pieces. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Sterling," she says, her voice tight with worry. "It just slipped. Leave it," he says, but she continues gathering the sharp fragments. Suddenly she draws in a sharp breath. A thin line of red appears across her palm. Without thinking, Graham drops to his knees beside her. He grabs a clean napkin from the counter and takes her hand in his. Their fingers brush as he presses the cloth against the cut. Her skin is warm, slightly calloused from work, but soft. "I'm fine," Luna murmurs, trying to pull away. But Graham holds on, his eyes caught by something else, a pale, raised line running across her wrist. Old but unmistakable. His throat tightens as he realizes what it might mean. A mark of grief, perhaps, from a time when loss felt too heavy to bear. Luna notices his gaze and gently withdraws her hand, tugging her sleeve down. "Really, Mr. Sterling, I can manage." Her voice is steady, but her eyes don't meet his. "Let Miss Loretta help you clean this up," he says softly, "and take care of that cut." He retreats to his study, but can't focus on work. The image of that scar haunts him. After what feels like hours, he picks up his phone and dials a number he hasn't used in years. "Marcus, it's Graham Sterling." "Graham?" The surprise is evident in his former colleague's voice. "It's been a while. I need information about something from 6 years ago, the navigation system lawsuit." A pause. "That's ancient history. Why dig it up now?" "There was a victim, Naomi Johnson. I need to know if she was part of our settlement." The sound of typing filters through the phone. Graham's heart pounds as he waits. Finally, Marcus speaks, his voice grave. "Yes, Naomi Johnson, age 24. Fatal accident on Interstate 85. Her family was part of the class action suit." Another pause. "Her sister was the primary claimant, Luna Johnson." Graham's free hand grips his desk until his knuckles turn white. "Thank you, Marcus," he manages to say before ending the call. The grandfather clock in the hall strikes midnight, its deep chimes echoing through the empty mansion. Graham stands at his window, watching raindrops trace patterns on the glass. Somewhere in this house, Luna sleeps, unaware that she works for the man whose company's negligence killed her sister. His chest aches with the weight of this knowledge. The past few weeks, her music, their quiet dinners, the gradual softening of her sadness, all of it feels tainted now. He can't tell her, not yet, not when she's just starting to find peace again. "I'll make it right," he whispers to his reflection in the dark window. Somehow. But even as he makes this promise, he knows that every day he keeps this secret is another betrayal. The rain continues to fall, washing the windows of his mansion, but unable to cleanse the guilt that now fills every corner of his carefully ordered world. In the distance, thunder rolls across the Atlanta sky, as if nature itself acknowledges the storm brewing in Graham Sterling's heart. He remains at the window, a solitary figure in a house full of shadows and secrets, while the clock continues its relentless counting of minutes that feel increasingly like borrowed time. The morning sun streams through the mansion's windows, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Graham Sterling stands in his private study, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in hushed tones. "Yes, I want fresh flowers delivered to the kitchen. Every morning this week. Nothing too fancy, simple arrangements." He pauses, running a hand through his silver-streaked hair. "And make sure they're there before the staff arrives." It's the first of many small changes he implements over the next 7 days. Each morning, Luna finds fresh flowers brightening the kitchen counter. Daisies, tulips, gentle roses in soft colors. She touches the petals with wonder, assuming Miss Loretta has arranged this small kindness. On Tuesday, Graham revises the staff schedules. When Luna receives her new hours, she notices her shifts have been shortened, giving her more time to rest. Again, she thanks Miss Loretta, who simply smiles and says, "The Lord works in mysterious ways, child." During Wednesday's dinner service, Graham clears his throat awkwardly. "Miss Johnson, I've been thinking, you should have Sundays off, for church." Luna nearly drops the water pitcher she's holding. "Sir, it's important to have faith," he says, the words feeling strange in his mouth. "Miss Loretta tells me you used to be active in your congregation." A smile, small but genuine, touches Luna's lips. "I was, yes, thank you, Mr. Sterling." Over lunch the next day, Luna shares stories of her childhood while serving Graham's meal. "Mama always said I came into the world singing," she says, her eyes distant with memory. "Used to drive my sister crazy, all that humming and tapping." Graham's fork pauses halfway to his mouth. "You taught music, didn't you?" "At the community center, yes." Luna's voice warms with pride. "Nothing fancy, just basic piano lessons for neighborhood kids who couldn't afford regular classes. The old center closed down years ago, but—" She trails off, shaking her head. Those were good days. That evening, Graham makes another phone call. James, I need a favor. There's a community center in South Atlanta that needs rebuilding. By Friday, Luna seems different. Lighter somehow. She hums more openly now, her voice carrying through the halls. When she thinks no one's watching, she even dances a little while dusting, swaying to music only she can hear. Saturday evening brings an unexpected gathering. Luna sits at the piano, her fingers moving tentatively over the keys. Miss Loretta stands nearby, nodding encouragement. Other staff members drift in, the cook, 2 maids, the driver, drawn by the gentle music. Graham appears in the doorway, intending to retreat to his study. But something in the scene holds him there. Luna plays an old hymn, one his grandmother used to sing. Without meaning to, he finds himself sinking into an armchair near the window. Luna's hands grow more confident as she plays. Miss Loretta's rich alto joins in, followed by other voices. Graham watches Luna's face, the peace there, the joy she no longer tries to hide. His usual scowl softens into something almost like contentment. Outside the parlor window, 2 gardeners linger, their voices carrying through the slightly open pane. Ain't that something? One whispers, Her playing like that? Yeah, the other replies, especially considering everything. You know her sister was one of them that died in that Sterling crash? The navigation system failure? The words hit Graham like a physical blow. His eyes snap to Luna, but she's lost in the music, hasn't heard. The room suddenly feels too warm, too close. He rises abruptly, mumbling an excuse about work. Taking the stairs 2 at a time, Graham retreats to his study. His hands shake as he pours himself a drink. The truth he's been trying to outrun with kindness and good deeds looms larger than ever. Luna's growing trust, her smiles, her music, all of it balanced on a foundation of lies. God help me if she ever finds out, he whispers to his empty study. The words hang in the air like a prayer, or perhaps a prophecy. Downstairs, Luna's music continues to float through the mansion, each note a reminder of what Graham stands to lose when the truth finally comes to light. The fresh flowers in the kitchen, the shorter hours, the rebuilt community center, none of it can erase what happened. As night falls over Atlanta, Graham Sterling sits alone in his study, a man caught between the mercy he wants to show and the mercy he desperately needs himself. The piano music fades to silence, but the weight of unspoken truths remains, heavy as storm clouds gathering on the horizon. In the kitchen, tomorrow's flowers wait in their vase, ready to offer another day's worth of borrowed grace. The days blend together like watercolors, each one softer than the last. The mansion's cold halls begin to warm with small changes. A good morning here, a shared smile there. Graham finds himself lingering over breakfast, asking Luna's opinion about the garden flowers or which china to use for upcoming dinner parties. The blue pattern might be nice for spring, Luna suggests one morning, her voice gaining confidence. It reminds me of forget-me-nots. Graham nods, actually considering her words. You have an eye for these things. Miss Loretta observes these exchanges with quiet satisfaction, noting how her employer's sharp edges seem to soften in Luna's presence. Even his walk changes, less rigid, more human. One Tuesday morning, Graham paces his study, distracted from work by the sound of piano scales drifting up from below. A thought strikes him, and he heads downstairs with purpose. He finds Luna dusting the library shelves, humming softly. Miss Johnson? He calls, clearing his throat. I wonder if I might ask a favor. Luna turns, curious. Sir? My niece, Ella, my late brother's daughter. She lives here with me. He pauses, running a hand through his silver-streaked hair. She's 10 years old and quite bright. But since losing her parents, he trails off, uncomfortable with showing vulnerability. Luna waits patiently, her dark eyes gentle. Would you consider teaching her music? The words come out in a rush. I've noticed how naturally you work with children, and she could use... He struggles to find the right words. Someone to talk to. Someone who understands loss. Luna's eyes widen slightly. I'd be honored, Mr. Sterling. But are you sure? I mean, given my position here, you're qualified. He interrupts firmly. More qualified than most. The next afternoon, Ella bounces into the parlor, her brown curls wild and her eyes bright with curiosity. She's small for 10, but there's a fierce intelligence in her gaze that reminds Luna of her sister Naomi. Are you really going to teach me to play? Ella asks, climbing onto the piano bench. If you'd like to learn. Luna answers, smiling at the girl's enthusiasm. Daddy used to play. Ella says softly. Before the accident, Uncle Graham has the piano, but he never touches it. Luna places her hands gently on the keys. Well then, shall we start with something simple? Maybe Amazing Grace? As Luna guides Ella's small fingers over the keys, teaching her the basic notes, Graham watches unseen from the doorway. The sight of them together, Luna's patient instruction, Ella's determined concentration, stirs something in his chest he thought long buried. Days turn into weeks. The house fills with new sounds, Ella's practice sessions, her delighted giggles when she masters a difficult passage, and most surprisingly, her laughter. It's been so long since laughter echoed through these halls that even the staff stops to listen. Luna blossoms in her role as teacher. Her natural warmth draws Ella out of her shell, and soon the girl is sharing stories about her parents, her fears, her dreams. Graham often finds himself making excuses to work in rooms near the parlor, just to hear them together. One evening, after a particularly successful lesson, Luna approaches Graham in his study. Mr. Sterling. He looks up from his papers, noticing how she stands straighter now, more assured. Yes? I wanted to thank you, she says softly, for trusting me with Ella. You've given me back my purpose. Her eyes shine with genuine gratitude. It means more than I can say. The words hit Graham like physical blows. Each sincere thank you is another weight added to his burden of guilt. After Luna leaves, he sits in his leather chair, the weight of truth pressing down on him like a stone. For the first time in years, since Sarah's death took his faith along with his heart, Graham finds himself turning to prayer. In the dim light of his study, he bows his head. God, he whispers, voice rough with disuse. I don't know if you're listening. I don't know if I deserve to be heard. But I need... He swallows hard. I need to know how to make this right. The silence that follows feels different somehow, not empty but waiting. Graham opens his laptop and begins researching Luna's old community center. Property records, tax histories, zoning laws. He digs through them all, looking for a path forward. As midnight approaches, he makes notes about renovation costs, permit requirements, and potential donors. It's not enough. It can never be enough to make up for what his company's negligence took from her. But perhaps it's a start. Perhaps in helping rebuild what was lost, he might find a way to rebuild himself as well. Through the open window comes the sound of crickets, nature's gentle symphony. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimes midnight. Graham looks at his scattered notes and thinks of Luna's words. You've given me back my purpose. He prays that when the truth finally comes out, she'll understand he was trying to do the same for himself. The late summer rain drummed against the windows of Graham Sterling's study as he signed the final paperwork. His pen hesitated over the line marked, Donor Name. After a moment's consideration, he wrote, Simply, anonymous. Outside his door, the mansion hummed with its usual quiet activity. Luna's voice drifted up from downstairs, where she was teaching Ella a new hymn. The sound made his hand steady as he gathered the documents for his charity board. "Make sure this stays confidential," he told his assistant over the phone. "The community center renovation needs to appear as an anonymous gift." A week later, construction crews arrived in Luna's old neighborhood. The abandoned building that once housed her community center stood silent, its windows boarded, its walls tagged with graffiti. By noon, the sound of hammers and power tools filled the air. In the mansion's kitchen, Miss Loretta was waiting for Luna with the morning paper. Her weathered hands smoothed the newsprint as Luna entered, still humming from her morning duties. "Child," Miss Loretta called, her eyes twinkling. "Come see this." Luna approached, wiping her hands on her apron. "What is it, Miss Loretta?" The older woman pointed to the headline, "Defunct Community Center to reopen. Anonymous donor funds full renovation." Luna's hands flew to her mouth. Her eyes scanned the article, growing wider with each word. The center where she'd taught music, counseled troubled youth, and led her choir would live again. The reporter detailed plans for new facilities, including a state-of-the-art music room. "Oh my God," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Oh my God." Miss Loretta wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Sometimes prayers take their time getting answered, but they always do. Graham chose that moment to enter the kitchen, his face carefully composed. "Everything all right?" Luna held up the paper with trembling hands. "Have you seen this, Mr. Sterling? Someone's rebuilding the old community center." He glanced at the article, his expression revealing nothing. "How wonderful! Anonymous donors can be true angels, can't they?" "God answered," Luna whispered, pressing the paper to her heart. "After all this time, he answered." Graham simply nodded, pretending surprise, though his heart thundered in his chest at her joy. That Sunday morning dawned clear and bright. Luna dressed carefully in her best dress, a simple blue cotton that brought out the warmth in her skin. She was helping Ella with her hair ribbon when Graham appeared in the foyer, wearing a pressed suit. "Uncle Graham." Ella's eyes widened. "Are you coming to church with us?" He adjusted his tie, looking almost embarrassed. "If that's all right?" Luna's surprise showed only in the slight pause of her hands. "Of course, Mr. Sterling. Everyone is welcome at Grace Baptist." The church stood proud against the morning sky, its white steeple reaching toward heaven. Inside, sunlight streamed through stained glass, painting the wooden pews with rainbow light. The congregation welcomed them warmly, though a few curious glances followed the unlikely trio, the billionaire, his niece, and his maid. When the music started, Luna felt it in her bones. The familiar hymns called to her like old friends. Before she realized it, her voice rose with the choir, trembling at first, then growing stronger. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. Graham watched her, transfixed. Her voice soared clear and pure, filling the church with something that felt like hope. Beside him, Ella squeezed his hand, smiling up at Luna with adoration. After the service, they lingered over coffee and donuts in the church basement. Ella ran off to play with other children, leaving Luna and Graham at a quiet table near the wall. "You have a beautiful voice," he said softly. "I've never heard anything quite like it." Luna blushed, looking down at her coffee cup. "It's been so long since I sang in public. I'd almost forgotten how it feels." "You make it look effortless. The faith, the music, all of it." Graham's voice held a note of longing. "You make faith sound easy." She met his eyes then, her gaze gentle but direct. "Faith isn't easy, Mr. Sterling. It's a choice when everything else breaks." She paused, stirring her coffee. Sometimes it's the only thing left to hold on to. Their eyes held for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. Graham felt exposed, as if she could see straight through to his guilty conscience. But there was no judgment in her gaze, only understanding. That night, rain returned to Atlanta, drumming against the mansion's windows. Graham lay in his bed, listening to the storm and thinking of Luna's voice in church. Sleep came slowly, and when it did, he dreamed. In the dream, he stood in the church again, but it was empty except for Luna. She sang softly, her voice echoing off the walls, while he knelt before her. The words wouldn't come, but his heart cried out for redemption. Her song wrapped around him like a blanket, warm and forgiving, though he hadn't yet confessed his sins. The dream shifted and changed, but Luna's voice remained, singing him toward something that felt like peace. Even in sleep, Graham knew he didn't deserve such grace. But perhaps that was the point. Grace wasn't about deserving. In her small room at the back of the mansion, Luna also lay awake, thinking of the community center's miraculous resurrection. Her heart felt full to bursting with gratitude. "Thank you, Lord," she whispered into the darkness. "For answering prayers I'd almost stopped praying." The rain continued falling, washing the city clean, while inside the mansion, two souls wrestled with the weight of grace, one giving it freely, the other learning, slowly, how to receive it. The autumn sun beat down on the construction site where Luna stood, watching workers lay the foundation for the new community center. Her heart swelled with joy at each brick placed, each beam secured. The skeletal framework already promised something beautiful. "Miss Johnson?" A woman in her mid-30s approached, holding a microphone with the Channel 5 News logo. "I'm Dana Wells. Would you mind telling us about your connection to this project?" Luna hesitated, smoothing her simple cotton dress. "Oh, I used to work here before it closed. And now you're a housekeeper for Graham Sterling?" Dana's keen eyes sparkled with interest. "Quite a change. What's your story?" The camera operator gave a thumbs up, and Luna took a deep breath. "This place was my home away from home. We taught music, helped children with homework, gave people hope." Her voice softened with memory. "Then my sister Naomi passed away, and everything fell apart." "What happened to your sister?" Dana asked gently. Luna's fingers found the small cross at her neck. "A car accident. The GPS system malfunctioned, sent her off course in bad weather." She paused, the old pain flickering across her face. "For a long time, I blamed the tech company responsible. But God taught me about forgiveness. Now I just pray they learned from their mistake, that no other family has to go through that." "And how do you feel about this anonymous donation?" A smile lit Luna's face. "It's nothing short of a miracle. Proof that God hasn't forgotten us." In his office 20 stories above Atlanta's bustling streets, Graham Sterling watched the news clip on his laptop, his face draining of color. Luna's gentle words about forgiveness felt like arrows to his heart. His hands trembled as he closed the laptop. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Sterling, your assistant needs a word." Sarah, his assistant of 8 years, entered, looking worried. "Sir, the press is digging into the community center donation. They've noticed the construction company has ties to Sterling Systems subsidiaries. If they connect the dots, make it stop." His voice cracked like a whip. "Whatever it takes." Sarah flinched, startled by his harsh tone. "Sir, just handle it." He slammed his hand on the desk, making her jump. As Sarah hurried out, Graham slumped in his chair, disgusted with himself. Weeks of progress, of learning gentleness from Luna's example, gone in an instant of fear. The afternoon crawled by. He couldn't focus on work, couldn't shake the image of Luna standing at that construction site, speaking of forgiveness she didn't know she was granting him. Evening settled over the mansion, painting the windows gold. The sound of voices singing drifted up from the parlor. Luna had started a small choir practice with some of the staff. Graham sat in his study, pretending to read reports while actually listening to the harmonies floating through the halls. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in." Luna appeared in the doorway, still glowing from the music. "Mr. Sterling, I wanted to thank you again for letting us use the parlor. The acoustics are perfect for practice." She stepped into the warm lamplight, and Graham noticed how she'd changed in recent weeks. She stood straighter now, smiled more easily. The weight of grief seemed lighter on her shoulders. "You look troubled, sir," she said softly. "Are you all right?" Graham's throat tightened. The truth pressed against his lips, desperate to be spoken. How easy it would be to confess everything. His company's role in Naomi's death, the years of denial, the anonymous donation meant to ease his guilt. But looking at her concerned face, he couldn't bear to shatter her peace. "Just tired," he muttered, turning away. "Should I bring you some tea?" Her kindness was unbearable. "No, thank you. Good night, Luna." She hesitated, then nodded. "Good night, Mr. Sterling. God bless." As Luna's footsteps faded down the hall, Miss Loretta emerged from the shadows where she'd been dusting. Her wise eyes took in Graham's slumped shoulders, the tension in his jaw. The old housekeeper had served the Sterling family for 30 years. She'd watched Graham grow from an idealistic young man into someone hardened by loss and ambition. Lately, she'd seen Luna's gentle presence softening those edges. But now something was wrong. Miss Loretta felt it in her bones. The weight of unspoken truth. The gathering storm of consequences. She'd seen enough secrets in this house to recognize when one was about to break free. In the kitchen below, Luna's choir was singing "Amazing Grace." The hymn rose through the mansion's halls like a prayer. Miss Loretta watched Graham press his hands to his face, shoulders shaking, and knew that Grace would soon be tested in ways none of them could imagine. She picked up her feather duster and moved quietly away, leaving him to his private battle. Some storms, she knew, had to break before healing could begin. The mansion settled into evening silence, but tension hummed beneath its polished surface. In his study, Graham stared at old newspaper clippings about the GPS malfunction, the lawsuit, the lives lost. In her room, Luna knelt in prayer, thanking God for second chances, and Miss Loretta sat in her rocking chair, watching the night deepen, knowing that truth, like water, would always find its way to the light. Dana Wells drummed her fingers on her steering wheel, watching the Sterling mansion through the afternoon rain. 20 years of journalism had taught her to trust her instincts, and right now they were screaming that she'd stumbled onto something big. The connection had been surprisingly simple to uncover. The construction company renovating the community center was a subsidiary of another company, which traced back to Sterling Systems. A few phone calls to her contacts had confirmed it. Graham Sterling was behind the anonymous donation. But it wasn't just any donation. This was the same neighborhood where Naomi Johnson had lived, one of the victims in Sterling Systems' notorious GPS malfunction scandal 5 years ago. And now Luna Johnson, Naomi's sister, worked in Sterling's home. Dana's phone buzzed. Her editor's message was brief. "Run it." Inside the mansion's warm kitchen the next morning, Luna hummed as she prepared breakfast for the staff. The morning light filtered through rain-streaked windows, casting gentle shadows across the marble countertops. Miss Loretta sat at the kitchen table, doing her morning crossword puzzle, while other staff members drifted in and out. "Luna?" Tommy, one of the younger gardeners, burst through the door, clutching the morning paper. "You need to see this." The urgency in his voice made everyone look up. Luna wiped her hands on her apron, taking the newspaper from him. The bold headline hit her like a physical blow. Billionaire behind GPS scandal funds victim's family center. The room began to spin as her eyes raced over the words. Sterling systems, navigation malfunction, multiple fatalities, Naomi Johnson, anonymous donation traced to Graham Sterling. Luna. Miss Loretta's voice seemed to come from very far away. Child, you're white as a sheet. Luna gripped the edge of the table, her legs threatening to give way. The article blurred through her tears, but the truth was crystal clear now. Every kind gesture, every gentle word, every moment of apparent understanding. It had all been guilt. Graham Sterling owned the company responsible for her sister's death. And he'd known all along. The kitchen door swung open. Graham strode in, his usual morning routine bringing him to get coffee before heading to the office. He stopped short at the tableau before him. Luna trembling by the table, the staff frozen in uncomfortable silence, the damning newspaper spread out between them. Luna's hand shook as she slapped the paper down on the table. "It was you," she whispered, her voice raw with betrayal. "All this time, it was you." Graham's face drained of color. "Luna, I can explain." "Explain?" The word came out as a broken laugh. "Explain how you watched me grieve, heard me speak of my sister, and said nothing? How you let me work in your home, play your piano, teach your niece, all while knowing you were responsible for Naomi's death." "I didn't know when you first came to work here," Graham said quickly, taking a step toward her. "When I realized who you were—" "When?" Luna's voice cracked. "When did you realize? Was it before or after I told you about the tech company that killed my sister?" The other staff members began quietly slipping out of the kitchen, leaving only Miss Loretta, who stood protectively near Luna. "I wanted to tell you," Graham pleaded. "I was trying to find the right way, by hiding behind anonymous donations." Luna's tears fell freely now. "By pretending to be my savior while covering up your guilt?" "The community center wasn't about guilt," Graham insisted. "I wanted to help, to make things right." "Make things right?" Luna's voice rose. "My sister is dead, Mr. Sterling. She died because your company chose profit over safety. She died because someone decided rushing an update was more important than testing it properly. And now you think throwing money at a building will fix that?" Graham reached for her arm. "Luna, please!" She jerked away from his touch as if it burned. Don't touch me. Don't speak to me. I can't." She pressed her hands to her face, trying to steady herself. "I can't breathe in this house anymore." Miss Loretta stepped forward. "Luna, child. I'm sorry, Miss Loretta." Luna cut her off gently. "But I have to go. I can't stay here." She turned and fled the kitchen, leaving Graham standing there, his untouched coffee growing cold on the counter. Miss Loretta gave him a long, sad look before following Luna upstairs. The rain continued to fall as Luna packed her few belongings into the same worn suitcase she'd arrived with months ago. Her hands moved mechanically, folding clothes, gathering toiletries, while her mind replayed every interaction with Graham in a harsh new light. The piano invitation, the shorter shifts, the Sunday church services. Had any of it been real? Or was it all just an elaborate attempt to ease his conscience? A soft knock came at her door. "Luna!" It was Graham's voice, heavy with regret. "Please," she said, not turning around. "Just leave me alone." "I never meant to hurt you," he said through the door. "Everything that happened here, the music, the conversations, watching you with Ella, it was real. My guilt about the accident was real too, but it wasn't the only thing." Luna zipped her suitcase closed, wiping fresh tears from her cheeks. "Goodbye, Mr. Sterling." She opened the door, finding him standing there looking more lost than she'd ever seen him. Without meeting his eyes, she walked past him toward the stairs. "Where will you go?" he called after her. "Does it matter?" The rain soaked through her coat as she waited at the mansion's gate for the bus. She could hear footsteps behind her, Graham following her out, still trying to explain, to apologize, to make her understand. But his words were lost in the sound of the rain and the roar of approaching bus engines. As she climbed the bus steps, she finally looked back. Graham stood in the driveway, rain plastering his expensive suit to his body, watching her with the same empty expression she'd worn for years after Naomi's death. The bus doors closed with a hiss, and Luna sank into a seat, pressing her forehead against the cool window. Through the rain-streaked glass, she watched the Sterling mansion grow smaller and smaller until it disappeared into the darkness. In her mind, she heard the last notes she'd played on that beautiful piano, now tainted like everything else in that house of secrets. Graham remained in the driveway long after the bus lights had vanished, letting the rain soak him to the skin. The emptiness he thought he'd filled with Luna's presence crashed back over him like a wave, darker and colder than before, because this time he knew exactly what he'd lost and why he deserved to lose it. The Sterling mansion settled into a heavy silence after Luna's departure. Every room seemed to hold echoes of her absence. The empty hallways no longer carried the soft sound of her humming, and the parlor piano sat untouched, gathering dust like an abandoned monument to what was lost. Ella noticed the change immediately. The next morning, when Miss Loretta tried to coax her into practicing her scales, the 10-year-old crossed her arms and declared, "I won't sing without Luna." "Sweetheart," Miss Loretta began gently, "sometimes people have to leave. Because Uncle Graham hurt her." Ella interrupted, her young face tight with anger. "He made her go away just like everyone else." The words carried down the hall to where Graham stood, frozen in his study doorway, each syllable striking like a physical blow. He watched his niece storm away, her small shoulders rigid with hurt, and felt the weight of yet another relationship he'd damaged. Miss Loretta found him later that evening, methodically destroying his third attempt at writing Luna a letter. Crumpled papers littered his desk like fallen soldiers in a lost battle. "You had a chance, to be honest," she said from the doorway, her normally warm voice edged with disappointment. "And you chose pride instead." Graham didn't look up. "I know." "No." Miss Loretta stepped into the room, her presence commanding his attention. "I don't think you do know. That girl came to this house carrying more pain than most people see in a lifetime, and instead of giving her truth, you gave her pretty distractions, built her hopes up while standing on a foundation of lies." "I was trying to protect her," Graham protested weakly. "From what? The truth she already lived through? Or from your own guilt?" Miss Loretta shook her head. "You protected nothing but your own conscience, Mr. Sterling, and now look what it's cost you." The days that followed blurred together in a haze of futile attempts at contact. Graham called Luna's cell phone countless times, each ring ending in voicemail. He sent emails that went unanswered, text messages that showed as delivered but never read. The silence from her end spoke volumes. 2 weeks after Luna's departure, Graham's assistant Dana brought him more bad news. "Sir, the community center project has been frozen. The publicity from the scandal. The board of trustees is concerned about the optics." Graham stared at the construction photos on his desk, the half-finished walls, the foundation that promised so much hope. Another dream he'd managed to break. That night, he sat alone in his study, surrounded by newspaper clippings about the GPS failure from years ago. Headlines screamed about technical negligence, about rushed deadlines and ignored warnings. He'd buried these stories once, protected himself and his company with armies of lawyers and carefully worded statements. But looking at them now, all he could see was Luna's face when she'd discovered the truth. The way her eyes had shifted from confusion to understanding to devastating hurt in the space of heartbeats. "Enough," whispered to the empty room. Graham spent the next 3 days writing, drafting, and redrafting until the words finally felt right. The public confession ran in every major newspaper and across all social media platforms. He held nothing back, admitting to the rushed software update that had led to multiple accidents, including Naomi Johnson's death. He detailed the company's failure to properly test the system, acknowledged his own role in prioritizing profit over safety, and announced a massive restitution fund for every family affected by the tragedy. The corporate fallout was immediate and severe. His phone exploded with calls from board members and shareholders, their voices ranging from concerned to furious. The company's stock price plummeted. Legal advisors warned of potential lawsuits. In the end, the board's demand for his resignation came as no surprise. Graham signed the papers without argument, feeling a strange sense of peace as he walked out of the Sterling Systems headquarters for the last time. Back at the mansion, he found himself drawn to the parlor. Dust motes danced in the afternoon light as he lifted the piano's cover. His fingers traced the keys where Luna's had once moved with such grace, creating beauty despite her pain. "Luna," he whispered to the empty room. "I'd give everything for one more song." Outside the tall windows, autumn had painted the world in shades of gold and red. Leaves drifted down like nature's tears, covering the manicured lawn in a carpet of fading color. Graham watched them fall, remembering how Luna had once mentioned that autumn was her favorite season, a time when the world showed that letting go could be beautiful. The dying leaves seemed to mirror his own transformation. His old life, built on pride and power and careful control, was falling away like those autumn leaves, and somewhere, beneath the loss and regret, he felt the first stirrings of something new, something that might, with time and grace, grow into redemption. Miss Loretta found him there as evening fell, still sitting at the silent piano. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, her touch carrying decades of wisdom. "The truth may hurt," she said softly, "but it's the only foundation strong enough to build a new life on." Graham nodded, watching another leaf spiral down outside the window. The old life was dying, yes, but even in death, it was planting seeds for whatever might grow next. He just had to find the courage to nurture those seeds, to face whatever season might come after this long autumn of the soul. In the growing darkness, the empty house stood quiet around him, waiting like the rest of nature for the cycle of seasons to turn, for new life to emerge from what had been lost. Outside, the leaves continued their gentle descent, each one a reminder that sometimes the most profound changes begin with letting go. Luna's small apartment felt different from the mansion she'd left behind. Here, the walls were thin enough to hear her neighbor's television, and the window looked out on a busy street rather than manicured gardens. But it was honest, and right now, that meant everything. She sat at her tiny kitchen table, coffee growing cold beside her as she read the newspaper for the third time. Graham Sterling's confession filled the entire page, not a carefully crafted PR statement, but raw truth laid bare for all to see. His words about the GPS failure, about rushing deadlines and ignoring warning signs, made her hands shake. "Naomi," she whispered, touching her sister's name in the article. The pain was still there, but something else stirred beneath it, a complexity of emotions she wasn't ready to name. Her phone buzzed again, Another message from Miss Loretta. Luna had been avoiding them, but guilt gnawed at her. Miss Loretta had been nothing but kind, yet Luna couldn't bear to face any connection to that house, to him. A knock at her door made her jump. Through the peephole, she saw Miss Loretta's familiar face, weathered with concern. "Child, you can't hide forever," Miss Loretta called softly. Luna's forehead pressed against the door. After a long moment, she turned the lock. Miss Loretta stepped inside, taking in the sparse apartment with knowing eyes. Without a word, she moved to the kitchen and put on a fresh pot of coffee. The familiar domestic sounds filled the silence until Luna's shoulders began to relax. "He's lost everything," Miss Loretta said finally, setting 2 steaming mugs on the table. The company, his reputation, his position, all of it gone because he chose truth over pride. Luna wrapped her hands around the warm mug. "Should that make it better? That he hid the truth for weeks, letting me—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "No," Miss Loretta agreed. "It doesn't make it better, but it makes it different." She reached across the table, her hand warm on Luna's wrist. "He's trying to make it right, even if it's late. That's worth something." Luna stared into her coffee, seeing memories ripple across its surface. Graham's face when she played the piano, his gentle encouragement with Ella, the way he'd started to smile more. "I wanted to trust again," she admitted softly. "I was starting to believe. Maybe that part wasn't a lie," Miss Loretta suggested. "Maybe that was the real Graham breaking through all those walls he built." Later that evening, after Miss Loretta left, Luna found herself walking to Greater Mount Zion Baptist Church. The old building stood solid against the darkening sky, its stained glass windows glowing softly from within. Inside, the sanctuary was empty except for Pastor Williams, arranging hymnals in the pews. "Luna," he smiled warmly, "I've been praying for you." She sank into a pew, the familiar smell of wood polish and old books wrapping around her like a comfort. "I don't know how to let this go, Pastor. The anger keeps coming back." He sat beside her, his presence steady and calm. "Forgiveness isn't about forgetting the hurt, child. It's about choosing to love anyway, just like Christ did for us." Luna's hands twisted in her lap. "But what if I'm not strong enough?" "That's exactly why we don't do it alone." He pointed upward with a gentle smile. "Ask him for strength. He's got plenty to spare." The next morning, Luna drove past the community center construction site. The half-finished walls stood lonely against the sky, tarps flapping in the breeze. A work-suspended sign hung on the chain-link fence. She parked her car and walked the perimeter, remembering the children who used to fill these spaces with laughter. This place had been more than just a building. It had been hope made concrete, dreams given structure. An idea began to form. She pulled out her phone and called Deacon Jefferson from church. "We need volunteers," she explained. "People with construction experience, willing hands, whatever they can offer. This center belongs to the community. Maybe it's time the community built it." The response was immediate and overwhelming. That weekend, 20 people showed up with tools and determination. The following Saturday brought 40 more. Local businesses donated materials, church groups organized lunch deliveries, and slowly the walls began to rise again. Luna worked alongside them, learning to lay bricks, her hands growing calloused, but her heart growing lighter with each course completed. Every stone felt like a prayer, every beam like a psalm of hope. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, Luna stood back to survey their progress. The volunteer crew had gone home, leaving her alone with the quiet building. "Maybe God's still not done with either of us," she whispered to the cooling air. The words surprised her. She hadn't meant to include Graham in that thought. But there it was, a quiet acknowledgement that healing might be possible for both of them. She touched one of the newly laid bricks, still slightly warm from the day's sun. Like this wall, built piece by many hands, perhaps redemption could be built slowly, with patience and grace. The bitterness that had filled her heart was being replaced, brick by brick, with something stronger, the possibility of forgiveness. Looking up at the deepening sky, Luna remembered something Miss Loretta often said. When God wants to build something new, he often has to clear the ground first. Maybe that's what all this pain had been. God clearing ground for something beautiful neither she nor Graham could yet imagine. She locked up the site for the night, her steps lighter than they had been in weeks. Tomorrow would bring more work, more challenges, more choices between bitterness and grace. But for now, in the gathering dusk, she let herself believe that healing was possible, not just for the building, but for the broken hearts within its walls. Graham's new apartment felt stark compared to his mansion. A single bedroom, a kitchenette, and a living room that doubled as his office. It was all he needed now. The morning light filtered through plain curtains, casting shadows on the few belongings he'd brought with him. He sat at his small dining table, coffee growing cold beside him as he read the local newspaper. His eyes fixed on a small article about the community center's revival. The headline read, "Local volunteers unite to complete stalled project." There was a photo of Luna, covered in dust but smiling, surrounded by community members with tools and determination in their hands. His heart tightened. She looked different, stronger somehow, despite everything he'd put her through. The article mentioned how she'd rallied the neighborhood, turning a scandal into a story of community triumph. Graham pushed away from the table and walked to his closet. Behind his remaining suits hung a pair of old jeans he hadn't worn in years. He pulled them out, along with a faded work shirt. In his garage, he found work gloves still in their packaging, bought for a garden he'd never tended. The drive to the construction site felt longer than it should have. His hands gripped the steering wheel of his modest sedan. He'd sold the luxury cars weeks ago. Every mile closer made his heart beat faster, but he didn't turn around. When he pulled into the gravel lot, the morning crew was just arriving. He recognized some faces from church, though they barely recognized him in his workman's clothes. The whispers started immediately. "Is that? What's he doing here? Should someone tell Luna?" Graham squared his shoulders and walked towards the site supervisor, a burly man named Joe who'd been overseeing the volunteer work. "I'd like to help," he said simply, holding up his gloved hands. Before Joe could respond, a hush fell over the site. Luna stood in the doorway of the half-finished building, frozen mid-step. The clipboard in her hands trembled slightly, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "Mr. Sterling." "Luna." He met her gaze, trying to convey everything he couldn't say. "I'm here to work, if you'll have me." She studied him for a long moment, her dark eyes unreadable. The entire site seemed to hold its breath. Finally, she nodded once. "Joe, show him where we need help with the cleanup." Graham spent that first morning sweeping debris, hauling lumber, and learning the humbling language of manual labor. His soft hands blistered despite the gloves, and his back ached from bending. But he didn't complain. Couldn't complain, not when every task felt like a small step toward redemption. Luna kept her distance, coordinating with other volunteers, but he felt her awareness of him like a physical thing. Sometimes he caught her watching him, her expression a complex mixture of emotions he couldn't decipher. Days passed this way. Graham arrived early each morning, worked until sunset, and left quietly. He learned to mix mortar, to hold, boards steady for measuring, to paint without drips. The other volunteers gradually accepted his presence, some even sharing their lunches with him during breaks. He watched Luna from afar, noting how naturally she led the project, how her gentle strength drew out the best in everyone around her. She smiled more now, though never at him. He told himself that was fair, more than fair. One afternoon, while they were moving construction materials inside, Luna was carrying a heavy beam with another volunteer. Graham saw it happening before it occurred. Her foot caught on an uneven floorboard, the beam slipping from their grasp. He moved without thinking, rushing forward as the beam crashed down. Luna stumbled backward, the heavy wood glancing off her foot. Her cry of pain cut through the air like a knife. Graham reached her first, kneeling beside her as she sat heavily on the floor. "Let me see," he said softly, his hands hovering near her ankle. The moment mirrored that night in his kitchen when he'd bandaged her cut palm, another lifetime ago. Luna's eyes met his, and the world seemed to stop. In that shared gaze lay everything: the pain of betrayal, the weight of regret, the tentative seedling of something that might be forgiveness. "Why are you here?" she asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. The question held more than just the obvious meaning. Why here? Why now? Why like this? Graham swallowed hard, his hands gentle as he checked her ankle for serious injury. "Because I need to finish what I broke." The words came out rough with emotion. Not just the center, everything. She didn't respond, but she didn't pull away either as he helped her to a chair and found an ice pack. The other workers tactfully found reasons to be elsewhere, leaving them in a bubble of privacy. As the day wound down and volunteers began heading home, Graham stayed behind to secure tools and materials. Luna had insisted she could walk, though she'd agreed to leave early and rest her foot. He worked methodically, his mind full of the way she'd looked at him, not with hatred anymore, but with something more complicated. The setting sun painted the halls in amber and shadow when Graham finally finished. He stood in the half-completed main room, where children would someday learn and play. The space felt holy somehow, full of potential and promise. Without planning to, he found himself kneeling in that soft evening light. His prayer was wordless at first, just the overflow of his heart. Then, barely audible, "Lord, help me be worthy of her forgiveness. Help me be the man she thought I was before—" He didn't hear Luna's soft footsteps. She'd returned to fetch her forgotten clipboard. She stood in the doorway, watching the proud man she'd once served now, humbled on his knees. The sight stirred something deep in her heart, a recognition that the change in him wasn't just for show. The golden light wrapped around them both, a gentle benediction on this unfinished space where two broken people were learning, slowly, the careful work of restoration. The weeks flowed like a gentle river, each day bringing the community center closer to completion. The once broken building now stood proud, its fresh paint and new windows gleaming in the Georgia sun. Volunteers came and went, their dedication unwavering, but two constants remained: Luna's quiet leadership and Graham's steady presence. That crisp autumn morning started like any other. Luna arrived early, her worn leather bag containing the day's schedules and plans. The scent of fresh coffee wafted from the makeshift break room they'd set up, mixing with the earthy smell of sawdust and new paint. She headed toward her old choir room, now nearly restored to its former glory. The space held so many memories, children's voices raised in song, elderly couples swaying to hymns, community potlucks filled with laughter. But something was different today. Graham Sterling stood on a stepladder, his usually immaculate clothes replaced by worn jeans and a faded work shirt. In his hands, he held her old wooden cross, the one that had hung above the piano for 15 years before the center closed. His fingers moved carefully over the worn wood, sanding away years of neglect. Luna's footsteps faltered. That cross had been her sister Naomi's graduation gift to her, when she'd first started working at the center. Seeing it in Graham's hands stirred something deep inside her. Not the sharp pain of before, but something softer, more complex. "Good morning," she said softly. Graham started slightly, then steadied himself on the ladder. "Good morning, Luna." He'd stopped calling her Miss Johnson weeks ago, though the familiar way he said her name still felt new. "I hope you don't mind. I found this in the storage room and—" He gestured with the sandpaper in his hand. "I didn't know it survived," she admitted, moving closer. The morning light through the windows caught the dust motes dancing around them, making the moment feel suspended in time. Graham climbed down carefully, holding the cross with a reverence that touched her. The wood's still good, just needs some care. He ran his fingers over the smooth surface. Like many things, I suppose. Luna watched him work, noting how different he looked from the cold businessman who had once commanded her to smile. His hands were calloused now, his face tanned from outdoor work. But the biggest change was in his eyes. The pride had been replaced by something gentler, more human. "My sister gave me that cross," she said suddenly, surprising herself. They rarely spoke of Naomi. Graham's hand stilled. "I didn't know." His voice was soft with regret. "Luna, it's all right," she interrupted gently. "It's good to see it being restored." They worked together in companionable silence for a while, Graham carefully repairing the cross, while Luna organized sheet music for the children's program she planned to restart. The morning light grew stronger, filling the room with warmth. "You made me believe forgiveness is possible," Graham said suddenly, his voice rough with emotion. He set down his tools, turning to face her fully. "I just don't know if I deserve it." Luna looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the weight of guilt in his shoulders, the desperate hope in his eyes, the humility that had replaced his former arrogance. "You can't earn grace, Mr. Sterling," she said softly. "You just receive it." The truth of her words hung in the air between them, as tangible as the dust motes in the sunlight. Graham's eyes filled with tears he tried to blink away. "That's what faith taught me," she continued, her voice gentle. "Grace isn't about deserving. It's about accepting that we're all broken, all in need of mercy." The day passed in a blur of activity. More volunteers arriving, walls being painted, furniture being arranged. By late afternoon, dark clouds had gathered, promising rain. Most volunteers headed home early, but Luna stayed to finish paperwork and Graham remained to clean up. When the first drops fell, they found themselves standing together under the center's new awning, watching the rain create patterns on the pavement. Without speaking, Graham disappeared inside and returned with 2 steaming cups of coffee. "Thank you," Luna said, accepting the cup. The warmth seeped into her hands, comforting in the cool air. "No," Graham replied quietly. "Thank you. For allowing me back. For—" He gestured vaguely at the center, at the rain, at everything. Luna smiled then, a real smile that transformed her whole face, making her eyes sparkle. Graham caught his breath, suddenly understanding why her parents had named her Luna. In that moment, she truly did seem to reflect light, even in the gathering darkness. They stood together, watching the rain fall, the same kind of rain that had once marked their separation. But now it felt different, cleansing rather than condemning. The drops created a gentle rhythm on the awning above them, nature's own hymn of renewal. The cross hung in its rightful place again, restored and strong. Like the cross, like the center itself, something broken was being made whole. Not perfect, perhaps, but beautiful in its restoration. Luna sipped her coffee, feeling a peace she hadn't known in years. Beside her, Graham stood quietly, his presence no longer a source of pain, but a reminder that God's grace could transform even the deepest wounds into opportunities for healing. The rain continued to fall, soft and steady, washing the world clean. In its gentle percussion, Luna heard echoes of all the songs yet to be sung in these halls, all the lives yet to be touched, all the grace yet to be received. The coffee warmed their hands as they watched the rain together. Two people who had journeyed from darkness toward light, from brokenness toward healing, from isolation toward connection. The silence between them was comfortable now, filled with understanding and the quiet miracle of forgiveness, freely given and humbly received. The morning of the community center's reopening dawned bright and clear, as if heaven itself blessed the occasion. Fresh paint glistened in the early sunlight, the building's restored facade standing proud against the autumn sky. The sign above the entrance read, "Johnson Community Music Center," in bold letters, honoring both Luna's family legacy and her sister's memory. Inside, Luna's hands trembled as she arranged programs on a folding table. Children's artwork decorated the walls, colorful drawings of musical notes and hearts, created during their practice sessions over the past weeks. Each piece represented hope reborn, dreams rekindled. Miss Loretta bustled around, directing volunteers and fussing over details. "Child, you need to eat something," she urged Luna, pressing a muffin into her hands. "It's going to be a big day." Luna managed a small bite, her stomach too knotted with anticipation to handle more. Through the windows, she could see people already gathering, familiar faces from the neighborhood, mixed with curious onlookers. Local news vans pulled up, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like metal flowers. The children from her makeshift choir arrived in their Sunday best, eyes bright with excitement. 10-year-old Marcus, her youngest soloist, tugged at his bow tie. "Miss Luna, are you nervous?" he asked, his own voice quivering slightly. She knelt down to straighten his tie. "A little," she admitted. "But when we sing together, the nerves go away. Remember what I taught you? Music comes from the heart," he recited proudly. "That's right." She smiled, drawing strength from his innocence. More people streamed in, church members, local officials, reporters with cameras and microphones. Luna spotted Graham slipping in through the side door, wearing a simple dark suit. He caught her eye briefly, then moved to stand at the back of the room, deliberately avoiding the press's attention. The mayor arrived, bringing an official proclamation. Camera flashes lit up the room like lightning. Luna retreated to the small office that had once been her sister's, needing a moment of quiet. On the desk sat a framed photo of Naomi, her bright smile frozen in time. "I wish you could see this," Luna whispered, touching the glass gently. "Something beautiful grew from our pain." A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Miss Loretta poked her head in. "It's time, honey." Luna smoothed her dress, a simple navy blue number that matched the children's robes, and took a deep breath. The main hall was packed now, every folding chair filled. Her choir kids fidgeted in their places, whispering excitedly. As she approached the microphone, the room hushed. Cameras turned toward her. Luna's heart pounded, but when she looked out at the faces before her, neighbors who had volunteered countless hours, children who had brought music back into her life, and Graham standing quietly in the shadows, she felt peace settle over her. "Welcome," she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "This building stands as more than just brick and mortar. It represents something far more precious, the power of community, of healing, of second chances." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "Many of you know this center's history. You know how it closed, how dreams seemed to die here. But today proves that nothing is beyond repair when we choose to rebuild together. This place was rebuilt not by money, but by mercy." Luna's eyes found Graham in the back. He stood absolutely still, his face a study in quiet emotion. We learned that true restoration happens in the heart first. Everything else follows. The children's choir rose, their small faces shining with anticipation. Luna turned to them, raising her hands. The first notes of "Amazing Grace" filled the room, pure and sweet. As Luna's voice joined theirs, she felt Naomi's presence strongly, not with the old ache of loss, but with a gentle warmth of remembrance. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. The hymn swelled, voices blending in perfect harmony. Luna saw tears on many faces, felt them on her own cheeks. But these were healing tears, washing away the last traces of bitterness. Graham stood with his head bowed, shoulders shaking slightly. The man who had once ruled his empire from a glass tower now stood humbled by a simple song of forgiveness. The transformation in him moved Luna deeply. When the final notes faded, silence held for a precious moment before applause erupted. The children beamed with pride. Reporters surged forward, but Luna stepped away from the microphone, walking deliberately toward the back of the room. Graham looked up as she approached, his eyes red-rimmed but clear. Before he could speak, Luna said quietly, "You asked once why I never smile." She felt her lips curve upward, natural and free. "Now you know, because I was waiting for something worth smiling about." The noise of the crowd faded around them as understanding passed between them. In that moment, they were just two people who had walked through darkness and found light on the other side. The journey had changed them both, stripped away pretenses, and revealed the truth that lay beneath, that grace could build bridges across the deepest chasms, that healing could spring from the most wounded places. Marcus's voice piped up suddenly beside them. "Miss Luna, can we sing the butterfly song next?" Luna laughed, a sound of pure joy that seemed to brighten the whole room. "Yes, sweetheart, we can sing anything you want today." As she moved back towards the front with Marcus, she glanced over her shoulder at Graham. He stood straighter now, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The weight of guilt had lifted from his shoulders, replaced by the lighter burden of gratitude. The children gathered around the piano, their voices rising in a song about transformation. Sunlight streamed through the windows, catching the dust motes in golden beams. Outside, cars passed and life went on, but inside the Johnson Community Music Center, something profound had shifted. A new chapter had begun, written in notes of mercy and sung in the key of grace. The autumn light slanted through the windows of the Johnson Community Music Center, casting long shadows across the freshly polished floors. It had been 3 days since the grand reopening, and already the center hummed with new life. Children's laughter echoed through the halls, mixing with piano scales and the shuffle of eager feet. Graham Sterling adjusted his plain button-down shirt, so different from his former designer suits, and watched a group of teenagers file into the business skills classroom he'd set up. Their faces showed a mixture of wariness and hope, much like he'd seen in his own reflection lately. "Today," he began, his voice gentle but firm, "we're going to talk about building something from nothing." He caught sight of Luna passing by the doorway, sheet music in hand, and added softly, "And about second chances." The youth program had been his idea, born from long conversations with Luna about what the community truly needed. She'd suggested combining practical skills with arts education. "Because sometimes," she'd said, "people need both bread and roses to truly bloom." Throughout the day, Graham moved between teaching basic accounting and helping young entrepreneurs draft business plans. He felt more alive here than he ever had in his 20-story office building. Each time a student's eyes lit up with understanding, each time someone dared to share their dreams, he felt another piece of his old self fall away. As evening approached, the last students filtered out, leaving behind the comfortable mess of learning, papers scattered across desks, half-empty water bottles, and the lingering energy of young minds at work. Graham gathered the materials slowly, savouring the peaceful moment. The sound of piano keys being wiped down drew him to the main hall. Luna sat at the grand piano, methodically cleaning each key with the same careful attention she'd once given to his marble floors. The sight stopped him in his tracks. She looked up, offering a small smile. "Old habits die hard," she said, patting the bench beside her in invitation. Graham sat down, their shoulders almost touching in the fading light. The familiar scent of lemon polish brought back memories of their first encounters. Her quiet humming, his cold demands, all the unspoken words between them. "I used to think silence was a weapon," Luna mused, her hand still moving over the keys. "But sometimes it's more like a garden. Things grow in it if you're patient enough." Graham watched her hands, remembering how they'd trembled that day she'd discovered his secret. "I never understood the power of silence until I met you," he admitted. "All my life I tried to fill every space with noise, money, success, control." Luna nodded, understanding in her eyes. "And now I'm learning to listen." He touched one of the keys softly. "To God, to others, to my own heart." From down the hall, voices rose in harmony as the evening choir began their practice. The sound floated through the building like a blessing. "Faith isn't what I thought it was," Graham continued, his voice rough with emotion. "I always saw it as a transaction. If I did everything right, God would have to bless me. But that's not it at all, is it?" Luna's hand stilled on the piano. "No," she said softly. "Faith is more like this piano. It's already here, already complete. We just have to be willing to sit down and learn how to play it." She turned to face him fully. "You thought my silence broke you, but maybe it was meant to heal you." The truth of her words settled deep in his chest. "You were the prayer I didn't know I needed," he whispered. The choir's voices swelled, filling the growing darkness with light. Luna's laugh suddenly bubbled up, warm and free, like sunshine breaking through clouds. The sound startled them both, and then Graham found himself laughing too, the joy unexpected but welcome. Through the windows, Atlanta's lights began to twinkle, stars brought down to earth. The choir sang on, their voices weaving hope into the evening air. Luna stood, gathering her things, and Graham rose beside her. They walked together toward the door, their steps slow but sure. No words were needed now. They had moved beyond the need for explanations or apologies. The silence between them had become a comfortable thing, like a well-worn path between two homes. As they stepped out into the evening, the narrator might have observed, he thought her silence broke him. But it was her forgiveness that saved them both. The air held the crisp promise of change, and ahead of them, the city glowed with possibilities. They walked side by side, two people who had learned that sometimes the longest journey isn't measured in miles, but in the distance between pride and humility, between hurt and healing, between broken and whole. Behind them, the music followed, a gentle reminder that every ending can also be a beginning, if you have the courage to turn the page. The autumn sun painted golden streaks across the community center's freshly waxed floors. 3 months had passed since its grand reopening, and the building hummed with the steady rhythm of renewed purpose. Where emptiness once echoed, life now flourished in every corner. Graham Sterling, dressed in a simple button-down shirt and khakis, sat at a worn desk helping a teenage boy review his business proposal. Gone were the tailored suits and cold demeanor that had once defined him. His eyes crinkled with warmth as he pointed to the budget sheet. Remember, Marcus, profit isn't just about money in the bank. He explained, his voice gentle. It's about the value you bring to people's lives. Down the hall, Luna's voice carried from the music room, where she led 20 children through a new hymn. Their young voices rose and fell like waves, some uncertain, others bold, but all reaching toward heaven together. She caught Graham's eye through the doorway, and they shared a quiet smile, the kind that spoke of healing so deep it had changed them both. The center had become more than just a building. It was a sanctuary where broken dreams found new life. Every Wednesday, Graham taught business skills to aspiring entrepreneurs from the neighborhood. On Thursdays, Luna ran choir practice for all ages, from giggling 5-year-olds to grandmothers who remembered singing these same songs in their youth. That afternoon, the center buzzed with excitement as people gathered for their monthly community celebration. Folding tables groaned under the weight of covered dishes, and the aroma of Miss Loretta's famous peach cobbler wafted through the halls. As Luna arranged paper plates near the punch bowl, a teenage girl approached her hesitantly. Her name was Destiny, a regular at choir practice who usually kept to herself. "Miss Luna?" The girl twisted her hands together nervously. "Can I tell you something?" Luna set down the plates and gave the girl her full attention. "Of course, honey." "I used to think God forgot about me," Destiny confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "After my mum went to prison, I felt so alone. But you proved he didn't forget. The way you teach us, the way you listen, it's like he sent you to remind us we're not forgotten." Luna's eyes filled with tears as she pulled the girl into a gentle hug. Her own pain, once a weight that threatened to drown her, had transformed into a bridge others could cross toward healing. She thought of Naomi, how her sister would have loved to see this place, these children, this restoration. The setting sun filtered through the stained glass windows, casting rainbow shadows across the wooden floors. While the celebration continued in the main hall, Graham slipped away quietly. He carried a small package wrapped in brown paper. In the entrance hallway, he carefully unwrapped it, a bronze plaque he'd had specially made. With steady hands, he mounted it on the wall, stepping back to read the words that had taken him months to find the courage to display. "In memory of Naomi Johnson, her song lives on." He heard soft footsteps behind him and knew it was Luna before he turned. She stood there, taking in the simple tribute, her hand rising to touch the cool metal letters of her sister's name. Tears streamed silently down her cheeks, but these weren't the bitter tears of grief she'd known before. These were tears of gratitude, of acceptance, of love that had survived even death. Graham watched her, remembering the maid who used to clean his floors in silence, carrying a weight he hadn't understood. Now she stood before him transformed, not by forgetting her pain, but by allowing it to shape her into something beautiful. Luna turned to him, her eyes shining. No words were needed. Her nod said everything, about forgiveness given and received, about grace that built bridges across impossible chasms, about how God could use even their deepest wounds to heal others. Outside, the evening air filled with music as the choir gathered for an impromptu performance. Children's laughter mingled with rich gospel harmonies, spreading across the neighborhood like a blessing. The same streets that had once witnessed Luna's despair now rang with hope. Graham held out his hand, and Luna took it without hesitation. They stepped out into the gentle twilight, no longer defined by their past roles of billionaire and maid, but united as partners in this ministry of grace. Their fingers intertwined spoke of a connection deeper than romance, a shared purpose born from shared brokenness. Around them, the community they'd helped rebuild celebrated life, love, and second chances. The narrator's words seemed to float on the evening breeze. Forgiveness didn't just save 2 souls, it rebuilt a world that had forgotten how to love. The music swelled, carrying their story into the gathering dark, a testament to how God could take 2 broken lives and create a symphony of healing that would echo far beyond these walls. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.